Buckle up and get ready to smash your health and fitness goals. This is FortitudeRx Radio, bringing you engaging conversations that inspire you to take action and take control. Physical and mental resilience, strength, nutrition, rehab, mindset, and more. We've got the prescription. This is FortitudeRx Radio. Here are your hosts, Tyler Campbell and Les Kais.
All right, so welcome to another episode. Today, Les and I are going to be discussing the reasons you're not losing weight, or more accurately, why you're not losing fat. So a lot of people struggle with dieting in general, and how do we actually handle these things so that it's sustainable and you keep the weight off and have a successful diet? There's a little misnomer or misunderstanding that is that 90% of diets fail or something like that. That's not true. It's just that you have to situate yourself into understanding what a successful diet is, because that can be just 5 to 10% weight loss. You don't have to be losing hundreds of pounds in order for a diet to be successful. You just have to lose a few and then adjust from there and keep it off, and you'll be okay. That'll be a successful diet. But a lot of people aren't necessarily just looking for a little bit of weight loss. They're looking to lose a good chunk to get shredded, lean, whatever, for summer or for some event, something like that. So we're talking more to the people that are struggling with, transformational changes. So to lead this off, essentially we have three things that are super important when it comes to losing fat. And the reasons that you're struggling to lose weight essentially are you're not focused on the three most important factors that we have in dieting or nutrition for this sort of goal. So you have calories and protein together as one thing. You have exercise and non-exercise physical activity, or Nepa, as two. And then adherence to the habits that support you. And we'll go over those things later on. But essentially what we have here is that people don't understand that the calories in versus calories out idea is just fundamentally correct. People like to say that, it only matters for clean eating, and that if you just eat these healthy foods, you'll lose weight in some way. And that if you eat some sort of hyper-palatable foods that are full of sugar and fat, you'll gain weight. It's the idea of that's a fattening food or something like that, when that doesn't really even exist, when calories are the only thing that actually determines whether or not you gain or lose weight. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you gain or lose fat, and I'll go into that in a minute. But calories in versus calories out is often misunderstood, and you may be misunderstanding the idea if you disagree with that. It may not be that you're eating too much. It may be that your calorie expenditure is too low. So if you're someone who has tried to diet, it may mean that you've dieted your metabolism down to a very low caloric output, and you need to actually increase your calories systematically in order to improve your metabolism for a weight loss diet first. So when this happens, what has occurred is essentially metabolic adaptation. And so you may have heard that your metabolism is broken by someone peddling something, but what that really means is that you've adapted, as you're supposed to a lower calorie intake over time. So when this happens, that lower calorie intake makes it so that you're in homeostasis at some point. You're always going to have some set point of homeostasis, some set point of calorie output based on what you're doing and what you're taking in. So your metabolism is not a static thing that is just, I always have a 2,800 calorie maintenance or anything like that. It depends entirely on what you've been doing, exercise-wise, calorie intake-wise, all this sort of stuff over time. And sometimes when you've dieted way down and your metabolism is now adapted to a lower output, you're going to have to eat less and less to a point where it's unrealistic. So if you end up somewhere where you're like, I'm only eating 1,000 calories, then it can't be the case that calories in, calories out is correct. It really probably is that you've dieted to 1,000 calorie metabolism, unfortunately. And we need to work on getting your calories up more systematically, like I said, in order to make a concerted effort to reacclimate your metabolism to that higher intake in order for you to then be able to go on a fat loss diet and be successful with it. And so to find your calorie needs and things like that, you do have to track your calories for a certain amount of time. It may be a month or 2 weeks or something like that, but you have to figure out where you're at in order to adjust your calories to match what your metabolism is actually practically doing, as opposed to just guessing and wondering why you're not losing weight. You can just guess and see what happens. It's fine to do that and work with the math there, but tracking is the simplest way to do this. So the next thing you need to do is figure out your protein needs. And a lot of times this can be 1 gram per pound of body weight or 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Doesn't really matter. It may be higher or lower than that. The recommended daily intake from the government is absurdly low, to be honest with you. So it should be much higher than that. Your kidneys are not going to be damaged by high protein intake. The only thing this is really going to do is help you stay satiated, full for longer, and support your metabolism better, because it is a calorically expensive macronutrient in that it takes more calories to digest it than it does the other two. So with regards to your protein, if once you find that, your remaining calories can come from nearly any combination of fats and carbs, as long as you meet about 30 grams, give or take, for fat for hormone health. So when we talk about should you do low fat or high fat or low carb or high carb, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You just have to meet your calories and your protein, and 99% of the job is done there. All you need to do is then fill in that space and the remaining calories with your preferences that keep you on track. So if you like to have higher fat foods and don't care about candies or whatever, then go towards the higher fat route and the lower carb route. That's totally fine. If you flip-flop that, then go for it. The thing is, if you also have days where you want something that has more carbs in it, then all you need to do is replace those calories from the fats with those carbs, so that you just stay in the same calorie range, rather than just thinking you need to add on top of it and then you lose your diet somehow. It's really not that big of a deal, I guess, to put it as simply as I can. Like, just calories, protein, and then fill in the rest up to your calorie needs, and you're pretty much good. The issue isn't necessarily that like you have to just be super objective with everything. You can enjoy the foods you're eating and switch back and forth between fatty and starchy or sugary, however you feel like it. You just need to adjust to one another, and that's fine. The biggest piece of this is you don't have to worry about clean eating if you do it this calories and protein way, because if you just follow those calories and protein, you're going to have to just eat mostly whole foods in order to satiate yourself anyway. Many people mess up this flexible dieting style by thinking they can just eat hyper palatable foods all the time, but they soon find out that they aren't full by the time they blow past their calories. And Les, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so if you find yourself constantly dieting and always feeling like you're adding a treat here and there, and then you guilt yourself and you try to dive bomb your calories the next day to make up for it, you can actually just work in that treat to work for your calories if you do it properly. So you don't really have to demonize any foods. You can still get your rewards if you just work them in and account for it with all of the other calories that you have going on. So that piece of cookie after you crush the day isn't really going to be a big deal if you make it fit.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that the idea here is that you should save, 10% of your calories or whatever it is. It's often cited as 10 to 20% of your calories should be from things you just straight up enjoy. And they're nutritionally void of anything good, because it doesn't matter. It's not even about that. If we're talking about adhering to the diet and you prefer to have something good every day, that it doesn't even matter what micronutrients are in them, go for it. Do that. Just make sure it actually fits in there and you've planned for it, because if you have something to look forward to later on, it gets you through all the other more boring foods. But the more boring foods are another topic for another time. Healthy foods and stuff like that should be enjoyable, and maybe you just need to learn how to cook them properly. That covers sort of just the math of it. Just remember that it shouldn't be super complicated. You should be able to find these things through like online calculators and stuff like that. I'm a nutrition coach and I can help you with some of these things, but it's not that like everyone needs a nutrition coach. If you can objectively just sort of handle a diet, what you need is just the numbers, and you just do it. That's another mindset thing of just doing it, but like, let's not worry about that right now. The next idea here for why you might struggle to lose weight is that your exercise doesn't support what you're trying to do. If you're not someone who does exercise consistently and not in a way that is building muscle or retaining muscle, then the diet by itself will just result in weight loss, but there's no reason for it to be fat loss specifically. The body is going to preferentially get rid of calorically expensive tissues such as muscle. So what I mean by that is that muscle is something that uses a lot of calories to even exist. So when you have more muscle, you burn fat much easier, provided you give the body a reason to keep that muscle. So that means resistance training. It means you're taking your body and telling it that you need to keep muscles to pick things up. And you do that by providing tension on those muscles and getting it near failure sometimes, and lifting heavy, things like that. It is part of dieting for maximum muscle retention and maximum fat loss as opposed to weight loss. So if I, as someone who has a bunch of muscle or to just diet and then stop exercising, I have absolutely no reason biologically to keep my muscle. It literally doesn't make sense for the body to say, yeah, let's keep this stuff that's taking up all my calories. It's going to try to keep fat and it's going to lose the muscle purposefully. When you do resistance training, it is the very best way to go over the long term to burn fat. So cardio is great for health and it's great for calorie expenditure. But when we're talking about the easy cardio versus the super hard cardio, there's a big difference here. And I think, Les, you have some things you want to talk about when it comes to that.
Yeah, so in the past, whenever I wanted to go into any sort of cut or weight loss, I would find myself thinking, all right, I need to get on the stair stepper and I need to do sprints or run and I need to do this very intense cardio training. But I found quickly that I don't really adhere to it. I focus most of my energy and time into lifting weights. And I just really don't enjoy training cardio very intense. So I fell off quickly and I wasn't very consistent with it. And we know by now that consistency is going to be the king to achieving these goals and losing this fat or weight or whatever it is we're trying to do. So the simplest thing that I started doing that I could actually adhere to and I found that I enjoyed was I would just simply go on 30 to 45-minute walks at a brisk to intense pace, something that made walking go from just leisure to actual some level of exercise. And I could adhere to that. I can consistently do it. And most people can just simply recover better from doing something consistent like a walk or a very light bike, something that just makes you move but doesn't actually beat you up. This way you can actually return to it the next day and continue to burn those calories versus absolutely murdering yourself on Monday and then you don't do any cardio again until Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, the recovery aspect is huge with that, especially as you're getting more and more deep into a diet and calorie deficit. It just feels worse to do that sort of cardio at some point versus going for a walk. And there's this like gradient of what exercise even is to me. So like that intense walk is exercise for most people, whereas a leisurely walk may be exercise for someone else, depending on how in shape or out of shape they are. But doing stuff that's not exercise, which is called Nepa, non-exercise physical activity. So there's another version of this called NEAT, N-E-A-T, that is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So I'm going to use Nepa mostly here, just sort of understand that these things are both just non-exercise activities that sort of fill your day with things and calorie expenditure. This is stuff from twitching your leg or moving your leg around when you're nervous to walking a little bit further to I was going to say the mall, but no one goes to malls, I don't think, anymore. If you're going to walk into the grocery store from further away, that's extra Nepa. And that's just extra calorie expenditure that you don't notice you're doing. But the issue is really that people, when they start decreasing their calories, they'll subconsciously start decreasing their Nepa. And what that means is they'll stop moving as much. They'll stop shifting in their chair as much. This has been researched sort of thing. It's not just me making something up because it kind of sounds like that. People will literally stop doing as much activity when their calories get low enough. And so you have to actually have a conscious decision to move around more often in order to match what you're doing before, if not do even more to lose the weight. So that means trying to hit the 10,000 calorie step marker and stuff like that. It's not that that's some magical number. It has been shown that when people do that, you have much better health markers over the long term. But what we want to shoot for is 10 to 15,000 steps a day. And if you can make some of those more brisk, then it becomes more like exercise. And you sort of go into that gradient of Nepa versus exercise and stuff like that. But whatever you can recover from best is what you want to do, as long as you're expending more calories than you are taking in, of course, like we talked about earlier. So if you're not getting 10,000 steps a day, it may be a good idea for you to start tracking your steps a little bit more, or just actively get up every single hour or so and just walk around the office or walk around the block, whatever it may be, whatever suits your lifestyle, whatever fits in your work life and things like that. Because when people talk about like, you need to go walk 3 times a day or something like that, it's usually not realistic for people. So do whatever's realistic to get you there, and make sure that you're actually not losing that non-exercise physical activity that we tend to lose when we get down on those calories.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be any great, grandiose thing that you put forth into effort every single day and like kill yourself. It just has to be small, conscious efforts of just simply getting up and moving a little bit more than you frequently would daily. That's about it. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to guilt yourself into moving too much. Just small, conscious effort purposeful
Yeah,
movement.
and I think that's a good point to be like the mindset of a diet and exercise and stuff like that. Like please stop making it a monster that's not. Just start small if you need to and build up from there, and you'll soon be losing weight and you'll soon be losing fat, as long as you're following the calories and protein and resistance training essentially, and any sort of cardio as you see fit essentially. So these four things together make up that the first two important factors essentially. The third one is a really big one, though, and it's going to be adherence to your diet, of course, adherence to your exercise, but it's adherence to the habits that support those things, such as your sleep, your stress balance. And notice I didn't say stress reduction necessarily, and the enjoyment of the diet and exercise that you're even following. So, with regards to sleep, so sleep is when obviously we have our regenerative period during the day. And oftentimes people, when they lose sleep, they notice that they are not losing fat as often, and that may be part of literally what happens during sleep hormonally, and that's often the case, but also that you may not move as much during the day or work out as hard during the day if you didn't sleep well. Les, what are some of the things that you do for sleep that you've noticed have improved your training or improved your ability to, have more output and things like that?
So this is coming from someone who has suffered from sleep issues for a really long time. Um, it's actually just been more recently that I've really focused on my sleep health. Some of the things that I've done for that is I just simply set my phone down earlier. We tend to be on our screens way too late, way too often. Sleeping in a dark, cold room helps a lot. If it's warm, I sleep terribly. And if there is any lights or noise, I sleep terribly. So at 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I stop working on my phone. So that means no more like endless scrolling on Instagram, no more answering clients, so on and so forth. I will turn my phone to night mode and I will simply get on like a little brain game, just some little game that makes me just fiddle my fingers around and just, gets me in like a state of I'm focusing on just this one small thing instead of thinking about all of the things I have to do the next day. So just finding something that helps you wind down at the end of the day, like reading a book, sometimes that'll help. Just something that takes you from the world to one simple, minute task for your brain to think of. Getting in bed earlier, because I still will like to maybe watch some TV show or something like that once I actually do get in bed. But if I'm getting in bed at 10 o'clock, and I'm turning on this TV show and then I get hooked on it and then I'm still up until 12 or 1. If I simply just try to get in bed at 9 o'clock and I just limit myself to one show versus, all right, I'm just going to watch this till I get tired, sometimes you'll have to put a little bit of effort into actually falling asleep. So instead of just waiting for yourself to get tired, I will just simply watch one show, turn my TV off, and then now I'm going to force myself to wind down. Obviously, sometimes there's going to be times where you still aren't tired and you're going to be laying there with anxious thoughts and such. That's when it kind of gets into you might want to talk to somebody or go see a therapist or get a sleep study done or something like that. But most of the time, our sleep issues are really just caused by ourselves and just being on screens too long, too late, getting in bed too late, and also forcing yourself to wake up at a consistent time frame is going to help as well. So if you are somebody that just continuously presses the snooze button and sleeps in later and later and later, and your wake up time is all over the place, your going to bedtime is probably going to be all over the place. So even if I do fall asleep pretty late, I'll still try to make myself wake up at an earlier or consistent time frame. This way I can get back on schedule the next day.
Yeah, and I think you said a couple interesting things there that I agree with for sure. One, though, that I hadn't even thought of was the brain game sort of thing. So my initial thought with that when you mentioned that was like, that's going to make your brain go too much into thinking mode, which is going to make you wake up more. But really, if you're someone who thinks a lot about other things and you're scatterbrained, if you put yourself on one thing, you'll probably be more likely to relax into that, something you can almost dissociate into before you go to sleep. Because I think that, when you train your brain to like think and start doing stuff and things like that, it's sort of an issue for alertness. But if it takes your mind off of everything that's bothering you or everything that's on your mind, then you're probably better off that way. And that's the same reason for books and things like that. If you're reading a book, or specifically if I'm reading a book, I can barely get through 3 pages if I'm in bed. Like I'm falling asleep and it's hitting my face, sort of thing. And it's a matter of focusing on something, even if it's an entertaining book and I'm like really enjoying it. I still just can't deal with it because I have to focus on reading, and therefore I can't focus on things that are going to keep me up. When I read on my phone instead of a physical book, I use an app called Twilight, and I use it on my computer as well. That's essentially, it's not just a blue light filter. It literally turns everything red specifically because that's practically the opposite. And this, is the light wave essentially that's going to help you fall asleep is going to be red over the blue light. So as simple as that is, that's the way you do that to avoid the blue lights more than like blue blocking glasses and stuff like that. To me, if you literally make it red, it's much better. And you also mentioned the cold room, dark room sort of thing. So for dark, for me, I have a sleep mask that I have to get because if like one little blinking light from a router or like anything like that will keep me up. So get a sleep mask. They're comfortable. They stay on most of the time, and it helps a lot. But to get your body temperature down, taking like a hot shower before bed will actually, self-regulate itself in the body to bring your body temperature down to get you prepared to sleep. So there's the current trend of like ice baths in the morning. The idea there is really more so self-regulating the body or making the body self-regulate to bring the temperature up, because that's what happens when you wake up. When you're going to sleep, your body temperature decreases. And that's why, it's easier to sleep in a cold room because it supports that. And so if you take a hot shower before you go to bed, you'll go ahead and get that down. You'll be relaxed. Sleeping is literally all about getting relaxed and getting your mind off of things in order to support going to sleep and staying asleep longer.
Yeah, and one other thing that I do struggle with is I have restless leg syndrome, so I kind of move around and I twitch a bunch, and it'll actually wake me up. One thing that's resolved that almost entirely is just simply sleeping with a weighted blanket. Just the pressure of the weighted blanket on me keeps me from moving around and feeling as restless, and I'm actually able to calm down and get to sleep faster.
Weighted blankets are incredible. And that kind of falls right into stress. So like weighted blankets are used for like anxiety too as well. And so your stress balance and things like that sort of fall into that. And when you're super stressed, your mind is obviously going a million miles a minute. But when you can't sleep, when you are constantly stressed, you're absolutely not going to follow your diet because you're going to be focused on all these other things. So sometimes that means allowing your bandwidth to go into a maintenance diet or something like that. So if you're stressed to the point where your bandwidth will not allow you to focus on your diet, then allow that bandwidth to dictate when you're going to do it. So once you have the ability to handle the stress for a diet, then go ahead and allow that to happen. Other times you may need to maintain and come back and forth to it. A diet isn't just a 90-day thing and then you're done with it. It has to fit with your life. And that's when someone like a nutrition or health coach can help you with these sort of things so that you can actually fit it in a way into your life that is realistic for you, supports your goals and supports your life, and isn't something where you feel like you're stuck in something and you can't get out. And therefore you literally have the subconscious mindset to get the hell out of here because it's sucking the life out of me. Dieting and food and all this stuff should almost always be enjoyable in some capacity. Unless you're getting on stage as a bodybuilder, you shouldn't be dieting down to the point where you're in danger of health. So it shouldn't increase your stress so much, but there's always going to be some amount of stress added from dieting, no matter what, whether that's a mental side effect or it's a physical side effect. Being in catabolism of fat is going to be stressful.
Yeah, and I think the tricky thing is a lot of people think of the phrase diet as this is a short-term thing to achieve some extreme goal. Really what you're eating at all times, no matter what, is your diet. So you're always on a diet. So if you can just think of it as habitual change and small lifestyle changes, it's going to be a little bit easier to adhere to.
And the adherence of this is like the base of the pyramid. It's literally how it works. I don't know if this needs to be stated, but if you aren't adhering to your exercise and your diet, then it can't work. How would it, obviously? So adherence comes from how enjoyable something is, how realistic it is, and how it affects the rest of your life, essentially. So if you can adhere to it, you're good to go. And that's part of a big reason why we do personalized nutrition coaching and personalized exercise training and strength training and stuff like that and programming, is because people don't have this perfect I'm in college sort of lifestyle and I can go work out whenever I want to most of the time, unless they're in college, obviously. So what are some of the things you've had to do with clients, Les, to get them into a routine that fits their life versus a more easy schedule?
So I have a lot of different lifters with a lot of different backgrounds. Some are in the military. Some may be stay-at-home parents. They're just kind of all over the place, and their schedules are all over the place. So it takes a lot on my behalf to actually have conversations with them and see what not only their time allows, but what they enjoy doing with that time. Some people can train 5-6 days a week, but they only have 30 minutes. So I have to make the most out of that 30 minutes. Some people also can only train 2 or 3 times a week, but they have 2 or 3 hours during that time frame. It's going to depend on the person, their schedule, what they enjoy. There's a lot of different variables there, though. The biggest thing, though, is I just try to encourage everyone to move as much as possible. So if they can't train 5-6 days a week and they only have that 2 or 3 day window where they can train, just simply getting them to move on their off days and really encouraging them to just get some 20-minute walks in or something like that. This way they can just move around a lot more consistently, and they're not just relying on that 2 sessions, 2 hours each session a week time frame. And then sometimes I even have to tell people that they do want to train 5 or 6 days a week, that they actually have to like take it a little bit easier at times, because they will want to just overdo things and just always ask for more, but they're not necessarily able to recover from it. So it's going to depend a lot on the communication aspect there, and what people are going to enjoy is actually really important there, because if I am prescribing somebody 5 or 6 days a week, but they only enjoy 2 of those days, and they're not necessarily being honest with me on how often they're doing their stuff, then that's not really going to work out for them.
Yeah, and I think that's a big conversation anyway on like fixing the coach to clients relationship, and the other way around as well, of like communication and things like that, and how we have to be honest with each other and work with people in a way that allows them to feel like they can be honest with us about if they're not enjoying something, because we have to change it and we want to keep you on board in order to reach your goals and stuff like that. So it's a big topic of conversation, I think, for another time. But that's one thing that's super important to me is, as a clinician, for one, sort of asking patients every time they're in here, like, do you feel like this is working? Maybe not every time, but like every 2 weeks or so, you should be saying, is this going the way you think it would? Are you getting your money's worth? Are you getting your time's worth? All that sort of stuff is a big part of what I do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have this misnomer of every coach has their style and their word is law. When that's not necessarily the case with most coaches, at least not good coaches, they're going to figure out ways to adapt and work their methodologies into your lifestyle. So if you are on the fence of, well, this coach does things this way, still have a conversation with them, maybe have a consultation, and you might be surprised that most coaches, at least good ones again, they can adhere just about anything into your life. You'll just have to have that open conversation of what you'll actually do, what you enjoy doing, and what your time frame allows.
So to summarize what we talked about here today, the 3 most important factors for weight loss, or specifically fat loss, is going to be calories and protein together as 1, exercise and non-exercise physical activity as 2, and then adherence to the habits that support those things, such as sleep, stress balance, and actually enjoying your diet and exercise, so that you follow these diet and exercise for a long time. So that's going to be all for us today. I want to thank you for joining us on another episode of FortitudeRx Radio. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of FortitudeRx Radio. You're officially one step closer to conquering your goals and living your best life. For more info or to connect with your host, check out FortitudeRx.com. We'll see you next time.